The first goal is parks and natural areas. And the goal that we talked about before is recognizing parks and natural areas as the vital elements of Nashua's green network. We want to enhance access to, better connect all of these areas for all ages, abilities, and income. And so the action items that we have are improve public access equitably across the city. And specific recommendations are public-private partnerships for Pennachuck Brook Corridor, including Pennachuck Pond, as this area is completely unprotected at this moment. Expand planning for the Salmon Brook Corridor, increasing public access, extending existing conservation, and providing better pedestrian trails, which actually the Conservation Commission is working on this summer as well, but certainly we have a lot more we can do over there. Review park inventory and determine how accessible parks are for residents, and then seek funding to improve that accessibility. There's the first one here. We want to improve and increase public access around signage and wayfinding so that people can find our recreation, open space, and natural resources. To improve access for pedestrians, bicycles, and those traveling by car. And so the recommendations are specific about creating a streamlined signage package, and also to use a digital platform and wayfinding app, as so many of our things today are on our phones, right? To go along with our printed map materials to make sure that the community can really access the city's park system. We want to improve mobility throughout recreational areas for all modes. And so create bike and pedestrian access to park for open space and recreational areas, provide bike parking and repair stations at park facilities. With digital mapping, let's combine some of our overlays for bike and pedestrian trails so people can understand the interconnectedness of our trail systems and our open space. And seek funding to create a rail to trail network along Daniel Webster Highway and the Merrimack River. Seek out new locations to expand rail to trail networks throughout the city. And when building rail to trail networks, explore how they can connect to the existing street network and different trail systems. I'm gonna pause there because I've already said quite a bit and see no red flags at this point. That's a good sign. So we want to provide recreational opportunities for residents of all ages and abilities, including universal design retrofits to playgrounds and trails that might be appropriate for ADA accessibility upgrades, and look to make those improvements. Many of these things in this list, you know that we've done a little bit of, or we're doing some of. We have a great universal design playground, but that's one facility and maybe not all of them. And so what we're talking about is these kind of things becoming more comprehensive throughout the city, because there certainly has been good work started in many of these fronts. Conduct feasibility study to determine how to better connect parks and develop regional corridors and wildlife corridors. So determine opportunities to create human and wildlife trail corridors that connect municipal and private conservation areas all the way to the Monadnock region. Again, thinking outside of Nashua and those larger connections so that we can enjoy the part of Nashua that can connect to our much larger region. And as part of regional park connections, determine how to get Mine Falls Park connected to the Nashua River Rail Trail. All right, so that's our overall goal around parks and natural areas. We do have a section when we go to the top on open space and natural resources. Takes a minute sometimes. There we go. Okay, so the first one under here then is recreation and open space. And we set the goal of expanding and enhancing open space and networks through flexible community programming and climate adaptation planning with a balanced protection of our environmental assets and redevelopment. So the first action is to establish public realm guidelines for street infrastructure, wayfinding and signage, landscaping and trees that align with urban design strategies. including working with the park and public works to create consistent planting plans and strategies to streamline our planting and maintenance throughout the city, and to streamline wayfinding and historical landmarks. Work with the Historical Society to continue to mark historical places throughout the city and along the brook. And I think this says Merrimack because we did have some comments from community members who wanted us to tie that Pennachuck and the northern area, which does go directly, part of it's in Merrimack, in with some of our Nashua areas. And so kind of keeping that continuous trail going, just because there's a municipal border, it's not stopping that wayfinding signage and looking at that historical corridor as a whole. So improve park amenities and expand park creation and programming. We saw a lot, and we talked about this a bit last week too, but seeking out public-private partnership and alternative funding to expand park programming, especially parks that have limited programming, and providing access to the programming spaces. So we talked last week about the need to create kind of one place that you could go to reserve different park spaces when they're not being used for something, in sports fields and things like that, because we've heard a lot from the community about being able to access when things aren't being used. Clearly communicate open space opportunities in conjunction with development, and educate the developers on the benefits of the public realm goals for successful implementation of design guidelines of these goals. Review the inventory of public restrooms and recreational opportunities, and consider parks and open spaces that would benefit from new facilities or resources. And design gathering spots for residents and visitors to gather with neighbors and connect with new people in our community. And update the city's natural resources inventory. So build on the effort to create a national resources inventory and update with park improvements. Identify those high value natural resource areas and incentivize development that encourages public access and use in those high value natural resource zones. And create a digital platform from the public to easily access the inventory and create print options for residents to review the information. You're all being remarkably quiet tonight.
You're doing a great job, Sarah. Keep going.
Thanks. I guess nobody strenuously disagrees at that point. We've done what we're hearing. We're saying what you heard from you, so that's a good thing. Outreach and education. Document and raise public awareness of Nashua's conservation land, open space, and assets to promote stewardship through education and community engagement. So expanding our social media and web presence, maybe creating an open space Facebook and Instagram accounts where people can share meetup ideas, maybe kind of like our kayak group does. Develop a single repository for information on the city website that includes interactive web map of open space assets, both city owned, public and private. And in conjunction with the wayfinding and signage, promote resources on the city's social media platforms. And then expand youth programming at citywide park facilities, environmental programming to cultivate respect and appreciation for open space and stewardship within our community at young ages, and work with Grow Nashua and some of our other community gardening efforts to develop a citywide urban gardening program, working with parks and schools to build gardens and create educational programming around gardens. Again, this is one that we have started in areas of the city, but that really has a great opportunity to grow. And we have some incredible community partners that are really helping to move this forward as well.
Sarah?
Yes.
Hi, before you get to the riverfront, I didn't want to interrupt as you were going through all of the parks and conservation land. One thing that I think somewhere, if we just make a note of it, as we look at improving access and overall improvements to our parks, one of the things I think we need to consider is just the heat, like today, and son. And we were very lucky a number of years ago at Roby Park that the Morin Foundation donated the money to put a canopy over the area. But I think as we look at our parks, we need to think about how accessible are them. I mean, part of what motivated that project was parents saying, you know, we would love to have our kids go there in the summer, but from like 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's not usable. The equipment's too hot, and it's just not a healthy place to be. So I think we need to think about that. And certainly with trees, we can take care of some of the shade needs, but that's not always the option.
That's a great point.
I was just going to add, within our transportation recommendations, there's one that it says to look at the urban heat island effects and then determine where more shade structures or bus stops can be allocated. And we can definitely incorporate that into this recommendation as well. I think that's a really good point. And also maybe consider other kind of like cool down options or splash pads. I think that's
right,
a very trendy thing to address heat.
That's a great point. We only have one splash pad in the city right now, and I know that we've been wanting to expand those, but we do struggle, as already said, in the one above this, that to put a splash pad in here, you have to have bathroom facilities.
Yeah.
Right. So they have to go hand in hand. So those are wonderful for days like today.
Yeah. And I just want to comment that I think looking at our the areas of our park and open lands that are less developed and using them for youth education programming around natural resources and understanding the environment is so important, because there's so many kids who just don't have an opportunity to go outside and to be able to provide safe, supervised experiences are great. I know at Roby Park a number of years ago, I think they, with Bicentennial and a couple other groups, they did GIS mapping of the woods at Roby Park. And I think all of those sorts of activities tie into the STEM activities we're looking at our schools too. So I think those kinds of partnerships with HAL and the Boys and Girls Club and Girls Inc. to use our outdoor recreational areas, not only to just develop an appreciation of the outdoors, but also to connect with some STEM related goals would be really helpful.
Excellent, thank you. All right. Anybody else?
Sarah, can I just say something?
Please, Sherry.
Yeah, I think a lot of these things are already being thought about, planned. Some of them are being done, but I think it's very fragmented. You know, I sit on the Hillsborough County Advisory Committee for the Hillsborough delegation. And, you know, we have people working in Nashua with young people, let's say at Major Drive. And, you know, they are looking to do this. And then you have, you know, somebody else, a volunteer who raises their hand and says they would like to do something. The problem, you know, that I see is that it's very fragmented. There's no way to get all of these different entities on the same page so that we're not duplicating, you know, efforts, and that we're building on some synergy. Okay. So I don't know how we do that, but I think we need to think about it in order to, you know, move the ball forward.
That's a great point. So maybe we need to add something in here, maybe not this section, maybe up a little bit higher, with the idea of the creating some kind of, beyond just the Facebook group that we were talking about and social media presence, but the larger network of those who are in education and who are doing good things around environmental education, natural resources, to be able to, as you said, not duplicate efforts, but build on synergy. So find ways to kind of connect those people together.
Yeah, and maybe have some, have a coordinator. So maybe you're right, you have a central repository, but then you have a coordinator, who can, so if classroom A over at Dr. Crisp wants to do something, somebody else who's working, with Bicentennial, however, so they're building on each other and somebody to connect people together,
And Sarah, I would agree with Sherry, and now I'm going to show my age. And many years ago, we had a child care coordinator within the health department, and she did a similar thing around early childhood issues. So people weren't all off doing different things, but it was coordinated, and we had different daycare programs and the school district preschool program. So there were a variety of people. The health department was there. I was there as a school board member. But there were a variety of people who were all focused on early education and literacy. Head Start was there. And so we brought our resources to the table and used them together, as well as building a system through Chris. And I think, to Sherry's point, it may be something that would really be worth investing in, because certainly we've got groups like the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts who are doing similar things to earn their badges on environmental related topics. So there are a lot of people out there doing this, but all on their own.
Yeah.
I think there's.
Oh, 1 second. I'm sorry. Kath Nelson has her hand up. But I'll go to you next, Peter.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes,
can you hear
we
me?
can. Yes.
Okay, hi. I just typed it into the chat as well, but what was coming to my mind is the whole idea of adding fishing as a recreational opportunity that tends to not get thought about so much in parks, but is a really healthy way to get both youth and adults outside. So I was popping into my mind, having something where people can find out where are some good fishing places, where can you buy equipment, maybe even encouraging groups. I know the state of New Hampshire, they still have it. I don't know how active it is, but you used to be able to request a fishing coordinator to come down and hold a fishing class to show people how to fish. So it's just a great outdoor opportunity, and we have great spots along not only the big rivers, the Nashua and the Merrimack, but even some of the smaller rivers. And I'm sure going along lots of the parks, there'd be an intersection with that as well. Certainly Mine Falls Park, for sure.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
I think the program up at the state was called Let's Go Fishing. And it was free if you just, contacted the person and set up a, coordinated a time for them to come down. And I think they'd provide fishing poles and things like that. So
that's really cool. That's great to know.
Yep.
Pete.
Yeah, I think we need an arborist in this city, at least for a while. We're talking about coordinating all these different events and whatnot. But over in Europe, it's very common to have an arborist that is sort of in charge of the whole city's concept. And the reason this is important is because in reality, you can plant shrubs and trees and all of that 100 years in advance. Okay, so there is a process where different trees grow at different rates. And as you plant them over the years, you will always have something nice. It'll change because of the age of trees and whatnot. Okay, and the only way to really do that effectively is by having someone who understands all of that. I mean, one of the examples we have right now is along the Nashua River by the library. Okay, years ago we did something really nice. It was beautiful. It finally got to the point where nobody could see anything anymore, and then we ripped it all down. There's probably a better way of doing that. So if we think ahead, and I think you can plan 50 or 100 years when you do that, and it's cheaper in the long run to do that because plants will take care of themselves in large part if you give them direction to do what you want them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Marianne. I can't unmute you. Wait, you're still not, I can put your hand down, but I can't unmute you.
I'm sorry, I thought
There you go.
myself. Cass' comments made me think about something I was just talking to someone about, the whole New Hampshire Wild event that goes on once a year and unfortunately didn't go on this spring. But there are a number of resources at the state level. And Kath, I was thinking about the fishermen who are there and they have marks out in the parking lot and kids learn to cast and they aim for a certain color, which I was always envious. I didn't have a kid with me, so I could.
Yeah.
But through the county, I believe every county has a forester, so you can schedule walks in the woods. New Hampshire Project Learning Tree certainly provides training and curriculum materials, and they worked with Bicentennial for 3 years on their integrated science and environmental ed project. But there are also resources through Project Wet and Project Wild at the state level that are available not just to teachers, but I know I used to do the Project Learning Tree table at New Hampshire Wild, and we would have like brownie leaders and church youth group leaders and Girl Scout leaders. So there are all sorts of people out there who want to do something. And again, it's just getting some organized materials to them so they can use them. And the materials are very easy. It's just kind of having a sense of how do I go about organizing this event and preparing kids for it. So I think there are a lot of resources in the state that we can take advantage of to identify some priorities and then really focus on them with the resources available.
And a lot of these sounds like it goes back to that coordinator that you guys are talking about, right? So that kind of pulls some of that together. That sounds good. Thank you. Anyone else right now? Okay, Julie was nice enough to point out that I did miss the open space, the climate change one. So I apologize for that. I'm gonna go back up and do that one before we do the riverfront now, if that's okay with everybody. So mitigation of climate change impacts. And well, if this is too quick of a change, let me know. But I think if we shift over this way and then go down to the riverfront, that will work out okay. So mitigate the impacts of climate change on the community and encourage public health. I love these two together. So to promote physical exercise, walking, biking, public transit through our built environment improvements. Incorporate resiliency planning into the design, development, and maintenance of recreation and open space. So create a citywide management plan for invasive species and encourage the use of native species and pollinator-friendly landscapes in city-owned and maintained spaces. Somebody just drew on the screen. I'm not sure how they did that. That's pretty impressive. Well done, whoever did it. Update our wetland flood protection and stormwater management ordinance to protect future flood zones and expand flood zone buffers and mitigate increased flood pressure from new development and redevelopment. Just so you know, we did just go through and do an update of our flood protection ordinance. based on some changes that we got from FEMA, but that doesn't mean that this doesn't need to be an ongoing important action item as we get smarter and learn more and more about our flood areas.
I think just to step in, I think that one is a lot of FEMA mapping is based on historical data and not projections. So I think as we're getting more data, I would just be incorporating that in.
That's a great way to say it. Yeah. Certainly is based on historical and not very specific, really high level data. So develop a robust climate action and resilient plan for Nashua. We do have our 2017 Climate and Health Adaptation Plan findings by NRPC. We also have the city's Resilient Nashua Plan, which was completed just a couple of years ago. We want to address heat island effect. This is what Elizabeth was talking about a little bit ago, to determine areas in the city identified as high priority in the CHAP, such as the French Hill neighborhood, and collaborate with UNH, Resilient and Climate, to determine areas in Nashua most vulnerable to increased precipitation and river eating flooding risks. So we want to adapt city infrastructure to prepare for climate change. And that kind of goes back to some of the stormwater, flood protection, wetlands ordinances. Conduct risk analysis of the city's assets, potential for future flooding, and adopt risk factors into asset management practices. And add resilience into project scoring within the capital planning and CIP. Jay Mankara has his hand up.
So forgive the static image if you can hear me.
We can, no worries.
I'm actually walking through Mine Falls Park as I speak.
Yeah.
This is probably addressed elsewhere, but I just wanted to, maybe put in a plug for integrating stormwater management with and green infrastructure generally with our park and open space planning, and looking for opportunities to really leverage, as we've seen in a number of cities, taking stormwater management improvements as an example and really making them a focal point of park and recreational areas, and looking for opportunities where possible to daylight streams that have been culverted or paved over.
Thank you, Jay. Those are great.
Hi, this is Susan Sling. Hi. So this just crossed my mind as you were going through this list of an idea. So the library does that program, right? Every year, Nashua reads, right? And we're all reading. Let's all read the same book. I mean, it's a great community building type of exercise. And so, as you were talking about the native plants and pollinators and invasive plants, what occurred to me is, wouldn't it be great? Because I have people asking me, and neighbors will ask me, oh, well, what should I plant for native plants? Or what pollinators are good? Or I have this thing that I think is an invasive plant in my yard and I don't know how to get rid of it. Wouldn't it be great if a couple times a year there was a focus, like in the spring, where it was talked about, okay, it's time to plant. What should you plant this year? These are the types of native plants and pollinators that if you've got the space and you're looking for things to plant, here are some things that you should be planting that would be great in this particular area. Or we have a problem of these 3 or 4 invasive plants and they may be in your yard. And it's just a way to bring a lot of people together at a certain point in time to focus on a few things and help a lot of people get a lot of information out there.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you, Susan.
Yep.
Next is Sherry.
Susan, there's a ton of information available on that. And one of the easiest things people can do is sign up for the newsletter for Pollinator Pathways. So it's New Hampshire Pollinator Pathways, and Margie Bean does a newsletter every month. But there's also a New Hampshire Invasives Academy that Carol Sarno, who's on this call and myself have taken. So the Conservation Commission has a lot of expertise in this area, but what we probably know is probably about 5% of what we need to know. I mean, it's a huge area. What you bring up, and we've thought about this before, is how to get this message out. And maybe I'll throw this out. Maybe one of the things to do is to work with the public library and for the Conservation Commission to lead a seminar, a meeting on that, and then bring in, some of the experts that we know who love to talk about the topic, and maybe do that in kind of like the March timeframe of next year. And of course, invasives we can talk about all the time, but I think that's a good idea.
Right, because you know what, you're right. All that information is there. People don't know it's there. And I think it's just creating that awareness and putting some focus, shining a light on it in some way that is easily consumed by the public.
Well, and this is the last thing I'll say. The one thing that we've been talked about and would like to get done. I mean, we have two pieces of property. The Joyce Park Wildlife Sanctuary is going to start getting developed. I believe it is next week. And within 2 weeks, we're going to have a trail there. And there are a ton of invasives over there. And also the Terrell property, where we would like to do walkthroughs with people. So if anybody wants to do a walkthrough of any of those areas with conservation commissioners, please let us know, raise your hand, and then maybe we can get something going on like a Saturday morning. But just send us an email at cc@nashuanh.gov. Okay, and it'll get to us. And then maybe a few of the commissioners, we can get something going and get it out to you. Just give us your email address and everything.
Okay.
Or thank you, Sherry. We could put your email in the chat too if you want, or the CC Nashua NH, we can throw that in the chat. Kath.
What was coming to mind with both climate change and then the segue with water is the whole idea of incorporating the concept of drought management into your planning process, and bringing it more specific would be perhaps looking at all your parks and your open space and thinking, what's the water demand? Are they, for some of the parks, are there areas that could be transitioned from water dependent lawn areas that within a drought year, and you don't want to be watering them, could be transformed into more xeriscaping or something that is less demanding on water. And at the same time, that could be used as educational if you put signage up, if you're transitioning something from a water dependent landscape to something less water intensive. It's an opportunity to inform the public of what you're doing and hopefully maybe lead the way to how to address what happens during a drought and using the water.
That's a great idea, Kath. Thank you. And I just want to clarify what Sherry said. There's no development going in the Joyce Wildlife Park, just because I don't want a bad headline. There's a trail being installed in the Joyce Wildlife Park that's going to be beautiful access for the public, but just in case, because I think you said the development's starting next week, and I didn't want anybody getting nervous that there's housing or anything going in over there. It's a trail, and it's going to be gorgeous, and the Conservation Commission is solely behind that.
Excellent. Congrats. That's wonderful to hear, because that area, I just remember it being, it was lovely years ago, and then invasives, including poison ivy, really just took it over. And it's fantastic you're addressing that. Very exciting. I can't wait to take a stroll and maybe help out if I can.
Thank you, Kath.
Can you repeat where that trail is again?
Sure, maybe Sherry, do you want to tell them the best access point? It's not done yet. You got to give us till mid-July.
Oh yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, but they're going to start work on June 15th, and at 2 hitches, they'll end the work July 9th. And anybody at any time, give me a call, send me an email. The Conservation Commission loves to show off some of the work that we've done, and educate at the same time.
Can you tell us
So
what
give me a
street do
call.
you go down to access the park?
Yeah,
To access that?
Yeah, it's right. So Girls Inc. is at the corner of Burke and Ingle Street. So you turn right onto Ingle Street, and it's a short street at dead ends, and you'll see some housing, some construction there. They're building some houses, but right to the right of that starts the staircase is going to be rebuilt going down.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. All right. Something along the lines of what you mentioned and Andrew Schultz mentioned in the chat with green infrastructure. The next one is to require the use of green stormwater infrastructure and low impact development on city property and create incentives to use green infrastructure throughout the city. We do that now through many of our land use ordinances, but it is an excellent thing to put in our plan and make sure that there's always new technology and new ways we can be learning to improve that as we go forward. Amber.
You may have just answered my question, but just for rewording it for my brain, is this going to include a priority for landscaping that is low maintenance or low water usage that would tie in with the uniform landscaping across the city?
That's a great idea. We can add that in. Okay, that's good. Thank you. I don't think we've been explicit. I think you're right. I think it's been hinted at, but making that explicit is great. So create citywide guidelines on how to implement stormwater management, green infrastructure, planting plans with preferred materials, which we don't necessarily have right now, and maintenance suggestions. Here's your maintenance. Provide educational training for residents and city maintenance to encourage adoption and understand how to maintain green infrastructure. On city-owned land, create goals and metrics for implementing green infrastructure and incorporate green infrastructure tools into design guidelines for development. And we have done this in the past. We do have some great green infrastructure and LID on city property, but that isn't something we've really given a focus to in a while, and it certainly could be renewed. So update ordinances to protect areas at risk of future and current climate hazards. And research and develop an ordinance that requires a transition away from impervious surfaces. All right.
Can I make a comment on that section?
Please, Andrew.
Okay, just a comment. I'm big on urban trees. I think they're extremely important for the cooling benefits. Shade shelter is good, but it's creates an impervious surface. Trees are, they can intercept rain, mitigate stormwater, as someone else mentioned. And I think a good idea for an action item would be to increase the amount of tree canopy in the city and also improve the distribution of tree canopy. So it's greater in areas that lack.
So increase tree canopy. And what was the second one?
The distribution of tree canopy, you might have more in some areas of the city and less in others.
Okay, thank you. It's good to get a more specific so that we can get down to some more measurable items in the next round of this. So those are great ones for getting there. Thank you, Andrew.
Sure.
All right, I'm gonna go to the riverfront then.
I just wanted to add, we do have some recommendations in the urban design section on increasing street trees, and but we can definitely add that into the open space section.
Great. All right, Riverfront Access. We've been talking about Riverfront for a couple years now and made some pretty massive progress on our downtown Riverfront, but we also have a Merrimack Riverfront that I know that we have some concerns about, and several others in the city. So advance the goals from the downtown Riverfront master plan, which we are actively in the process of doing, and to leverage our vital environmental, community, and economic assets through the lens of equity, resilience, and climate protection. And I think that's really important, is looking at them through those lenses. So build on ongoing efforts to improve access and activate both sides of the Nashua Riverfront to strengthen our connections to the neighborhoods and downtown. So we're talking about improved accessibility and ADA standards and signage. Extend that pathway on the north side of the river to Lincoln Park and the extensions of Franklin Street to join the Broad Street Parkway. Link the shoreside walkway to the development of the old river industrial area and connect it to the new Riverside apartment complex at the outlet of the Nashua River. So this is actually down by the Merrimack River and the Nashua River where they connect. And so it's kind of talking about that shoreside connection along that way and connecting that into the neighborhood itself. And the newly expanded Nashua River Eastern Bikeway should include a branch that crosses the Nashua on the abandoned railroad bridge and thereby providing pedestrian access to Thoreau's Landing. Again, this is more at the Nashua River Merrimack River junction. So maybe we can kind of separate those out a little bit, but talking about really expanding that trail through the railroad bridges and up along the Merrimack access point. So the connection between the Nashua River and the Merrimack River for pedestrian and bicycle access is not well defined or accessible right now. And I think that's what this is trying to get to. The next one is enhance access to the Merrimack River and expanding that trail from along the Merrimack River from the Massachusetts border to Franconia Notch. That's a goal statewide to try and connect. And again, it's really nice to tie this to some of those larger regional goals. And address industrial discharge in the Nashua and Merrimack Rivers. So funding to remediate the river and hire an environmental firm to assess discharge and determine the prioritization of remediation. A lot of great work has already been done in this area, a ton. And actually the MS4 stormwater permit we have tons of detail and data on this already. And so it's certainly something that would be great to outline in the master plan and make it as a consistent goal going forward too, because a lot of work has been done towards that.
Good.
Kath Nelson?
All good points I'm seeing. One that jumped out at my mind is labeling the storm drains that are connected to waterways, and doing some outreach and education so people know whatever goes down, only rain down the drain type of thing. A lot of times people aren't aware that that the storm drains are connected to the rivers still. And I think the city has done some discharge outlet surveys.
Yeah.
And that could be all part of the MS4, but that always seems like it's an ongoing issue, just to make sure nothing goes in the storm drains that eventually get out to the river. The one that sort of grabs my attention all the time is when people put the poop bags down the storm drains. They think it's out of sight, out of mind. At the Nashua River Watershed Association, we actually helped the city a few years back with their storm drain surveys. And it was so sad to see the poop bags down at the river, by some of the rivers, just people thinking they were using it as like a sanitary trash can, but that's not the case. So I'm sure you've all seen those stencils or marks that are up by the storm drains that say in different languages and English for people not to use them for anything, only rain down the drain.
That's a great one, Kathy. I remember we used to have Polly Pickerel as our
Right.
mascot, and we
Exactly.
used to paint the storm drains that went to the river with Polly Pickerel, and I'm sure they something to kind of, like you said, it's an ongoing effort to keep that education alive.
Yes,
Can I
because
make a quick
and the
comment on that?
stencilings, yep, the stencilings tend to wear away. And it's
Right.
also segueing over to the, working with youth. It's a great project to get boys, Girl Scouts, youth leaders, involved in, so that the physical process of them doing it also makes it them aware, and they feel like they have a little more stake in keeping the river clean.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Amber.
So so I'm also the chair of the Animal and Dog Park Advisory Committee. And so we hear that, Kath, a lot of those dog waste, bags and where they end up. So that has been a goal of ours. Unfortunately, in the last year, we were not able to get together, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts to actually come together and do those projects. So now that we're starting to get a little bit more back to normal, we'll be able to do that. And I'd love to partner with you on what those sites that look like. I'll put my email in the chat. Also, if you do know of problem areas specifically, we always want to know what that is.
All right, great. Yeah.
And then my second question was, dredging is, yes. Would we, I don't know when the last time the rivers were dredged, the bottom of the canals specifically, with shopping carts, veil bikes, chairs, etc.
So I don't know that we want to call it dredging, but I think what you're talking about in the canal is a really important thing, is that maybe about 10 years ago, the city invested in somebody to come through with a barge and clean the trash and large debris out of it. And I think that's more of what you're talking about.
Correct. Yep.
And that was a great effort, but yes, it's been quite a while and it is probably refilled significantly. But we don't really dredge the rivers because so I think you were just trying to get us to clean up again. And I think that's a great point. Yeah. Especially the canal, which is, a couple miles, almost 2 miles right through the heart of our community, that could be much more of an asset if it was some of the unfortunate litter and things were removed, large litter.
Correct. Yes, that's what I meant.
I just, this is Deb Chisholm. I just wanted to piggyback on what Kath Nelson was saying about the stenciling. And my understanding, after talking with the Amy Gill over at DPW, is that as we are continuing the massive paving projects, any of the storm drains that are connected to the rivers are actually getting a special grate that does say no dumping, connected to waterways. And I believe the city has purchased about 500 of those this year. So kind of taking the bull by the horns on that right away and continuing with the same message, because the other stencils were actually ending up in the storm drains after they've been ripped up by snow plows, et cetera. So the new program is a little less glamorous, but certainly gets to the same point.
Great.
Oh, kudos to DPW.
Good news.
That's excellent.
If I could make a quick comment on the levees down on the east side of the city here. We have a levee that comes from the merging of the Merrimack River. With Nashua and the Merrimack River, there's a significant levee that goes along there. And for years, we've been wondering what to do with that, because, it's theoretically under the control of the Corps of Engineers. But I know Tim Cummings talked to the Corps of Engineers last year, I think it was, and they have no problem with us doing something as long as it meets, the right requirements. So I just want to point that out, that we can do that, because I've spent years trying to get someone to figure out whether we could do something with it. And the Corps of Engineers does not have an issue with it.
As long as we meet all their standards. I think that's a really important clause that you said there, Pete, that I just want to make sure we still have to go through permitting with them, and we have to meet their standards, but yes, it is possible. Absolutely.
But there are lots of cities that have done it, so it's doable. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Excellent. So that was all of the items for tonight, and I think we've had some really good discussion, but are there any things that we're missing here? And if you don't think of them now, again, I really encourage you to use that form that's right at the top of the website here, that you can easily fill in as this comes to you later. I know I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, I wish I said that, right? Or, oh, I wish I had that. Please use this form and fill it out, and we get that, and it's easy for us to input that information in. It's right there and it's already written down, and it's easy for us to kind of amalgamate that into all the other feedback that we've gotten. Kath.
Hey,
This is
Amber.
real-
Oh,
One quick thought is if you could encourage and somebody to open up like a kayak or canoe rental area, facility on either of the rivers. It's something I personally always wanted to, see in the city. I think the nearest one might be up, when you're getting up toward Concord or that area.
hey, Kath,
So
there is one. There is
Oh.
one. In fact, Nashua Rotary has been using this person, and now his name escapes me, but he brings the kayaks anywhere you want along the Nashua. For us, he's been bringing them to the Nashua Technology Park. And he
that's
rents
good.
them for 2 hours for $35.
That's excellent. So I guess if you've already found someone, then just maybe have the city advertise that, or just, promote it and keep it going. Because over the years, people have come and gone. So just making sure that's all, hopefully always part of the city goal to encourage that to be an option, just so you can get people out on the river at a decent price.
Right. He's got 20,
Thank you.
20 kayaks.
That's
They-
great. All right, Susan. Yep. Thank you. Thank you for that info.
Yep.
Marianne.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to a comment someone made about tree canopies, and I know Andrew had talked about that, and planting trees. I think when we think about planting trees, we think about new developments or places downtown where there were never trees on the street. But one of the things I know we're certainly seeing in Ward 8 is that we have very, very old trees, and people are cutting them down for safety reasons, or they're coming down because of snow and wind and those sorts of things. And I think it would be interesting to talk to people in older, more developed neighborhoods about the impact of taking down those trees, and then how do you plan and plant new trees? Because of course, many of the trees that are in our neighborhoods, like this neighborhood was developed in the mid to late 70s. There are trees that were here and builders just left them. But now that they're coming down, how do you plan for them? And I mean, I know personally, I have a couple of trees that I'm like, ooh, I don't want to take them down because they keep me cool in the summer. And so just helping people figure out what trees might be good for whatever your needs are and for your location. So I think we need to think about educating people in more established neighborhoods where trees are coming down for basically safety reasons.
So making sure that urban tree canopy really talks to our established neighborhoods too, and not just street trees, which is what we kind of focus on, and those long-term plans for not just taking down, but for replacing and keeping that tree canopy alive. Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you.
Amber, I have a question regarding some of the comments that were made. Where can I find a diagram, for example, that talks about the idea of a rail to trail network along the Daniel Webster Highway, or connecting Mine Falls Park to the Nashua Rail Trail? Are there actual maps that you can go to that show what that would look like?
I'm going to pass this over to Julie Chismus first to direct you to the maps that are available through the Regional Planning Commission's Bike Walk Ped Plan. Has some of that.
Yeah. So I can throw the the link to that plan in the chat pod after I hunt it up and copy and paste it. But we are actually looking for funding to make that connection between Mine Falls and the Nashua River Rail Trail. That's a really high priority that came out in that plan. We've heard it in a variety of different meetings. I also did put a plug in for the statewide plan for a trail along DW Highway to connect the greater, not just for Nashua, but to connect the greater region. So there are some activities that we're doing, have underway. The Nashua Regional Planning Commission on their website also has a really good trail map, and they have a fabulous what's called a story map that really has some great information. I'll I bet Andrew could put that. Is Andrew still on, or Jay could put their link in the chat pod?
I'm on it.
All right, thank you, Andrew. So say Jay's walking in the woods, so probably not Jay.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Sorry. That's where he's at Mine Falls. So a lot of words to answer a simple question, but there are some resources out there, and we'll try to get them to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Pete.
Do we know if Nashua has a tree farm, for example?
So tree farms are private. I believe there are some tree farms in Nashua, but I'm not exactly sure where. We could check with assessing on that, but those are private. We do have an arborist, and we do have some tree plans, but certainly could be improved there. So, yeah.
Well, the reason I bring it up is there's a humongous tree in the back of my house. It's humongous. Okay, it's a maple, and someday it's going to go, but it's been there for at least 150 years. And like right now, there are like a gazillion of these. What do you call them? People call them helicopters. Things that fall off the trees, okay? And that's a very good stock tree, local stock tree. I don't know if anybody could take those and just plant some. In a few years, you'll have something you could use. And it's good stock. I'm saying there's stuff laying around. There's stuff laying around we could use.
Certainly you could talk to some nurseries in the area, but I don't think that's something that the city's going to do. But if you have a great tree like that, you could talk to some of the nurseries in the area, certainly.
I was thinking about it for the city because we're talking about planting trees for the city.
Yeah, we don't do our own nursery work, though.
Would it be cheaper to grow them? It's easy to do it on their own.
No.
All right.
All right. I think it's been a pretty awesome discussion tonight. Thank you all so much for your ideas and input. If you're coming back on Thursday night, we'll be talking about transportation and mobility. The agenda is posted. Please look at it ahead of time if that helps. Oh, Amber, saying goodbye to all. Goodbye, Amber. So we'll be back here Thursday night, and we will have some more scenarios that we'll actually be going through. I don't know if you're here with us last week. We were able to go through some more images, not just words. So it should be a bit more interactive with the images on Thursday night. And thank you all so much for joining us.